5 years had passed since the first Velkari ships had appeared in Earth's sky. The galaxy was quiet now, but it was the silence of a predator's territory rather than peace. Jiwan stood in what had once been the Velkari capital, now transformed, into a human administrative center. The crystal buildings remained, but they had been modified to serve new purposes. Enhanced humans had learned to reshape Velkari architecture with the same efficiency they had once used to hunt their creators. The transformation was beautiful and terrible. Spires that had once housed the collective consciousness now served as communication hubs for the enhanced human network that spanned dozens of star systems. Gardens that had been designed for alien aesthetics now grew earth plants in impossible combinations of color and form. It was a monument to victory, but also to change so complete that the victors barely recognized themselves. "Commander," a voice said behind her. Jiwan turned to see Gunho approaching across the plaza. He moved with the fluid grace that all enhanced humans had developed, but something in his posture suggested tension. "What is it?" she asked. "We have a visitor, someone who insisted on speaking with you personally." Jiwan followed Gunho through corridors that hummed with activity. Enhanced humans worked at stations throughout the complex, monitoring communications from across their territory and coordinating the management of dozens of worlds. They moved and thought as one organism, sharing information and decisions through mental links that had evolved far beyond anything the original enhancement process had created. The visitor was waiting in what had once been an audience chamber for Velkari administrators. He was an older man, gray-haired and weathered, wearing the simple clothes of Earth's agricultural settlements. When he looked up at Jiwan's approach, she recognized him immediately. "Hello, Jiwan," he said quietly. It was her father. For a moment, enhanced reflexes and tactical awareness meant nothing. Jiwan felt something that might have been the ghost of human emotion stirring in her consciousness, unfamiliar and disorienting. "Dad," she said, and was surprised by how strange the word felt in her mouth. He studied her face with the careful attention of someone examining a beloved photograph that had been altered beyond recognition. "You look the same," he said finally. "But your eyes are different." Jiwan knew what he meant. Enhanced humans maintained their physical appearance, but their eyes held a coldness that no unmodified human could match. They were the eyes of apex predators, always calculating, always aware, never entirely at rest. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Because someone needs to ask the question," he replied. "What happens now?" It was the same question that had haunted enhanced humans since the end of the war. They had eliminated the Velkari threat, but in doing so they had become something that normal humans found difficult to understand or trust. "We protect humanity," Jiwan said, repeating the answer she had given to herself countless times. "We ensure that no other species ever threatens Earth again." By becoming the most dangerous species in the galaxy ourselves? The accusation hung between them like a blade. Enhanced humans had indeed become the dominant force in this region of space. Their technology was superior to anything else they had encountered. Their tactical abilities were unmatched, and their expansion showed no signs of slowing. "If that's what it takes," Jiwan replied. Her father was quiet for a long moment, looking around the chamber with its blend of alien architecture and human modifications. "Do you remember being human?" he asked finally. The question struck deeper than any physical weapon could have. Jiwan accessed her memory files, reviewing recordings of her pre-enhancement personality and behavior patterns. She could observe her former self like a scientist studying data, but the emotional connections felt distant and analytical. "I remember it," she said, "but it feels like remembering someone else's life." "That's what I was afraid of," her father said sadly. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, and Gunho entered with several other enhanced humans. They moved with perfect coordination, their shared consciousness allowing them to communicate without words. To Jiwan, their presence felt natural and comforting. To her father, she realized they probably looked like a pack of predators surrounding their prey. "Is there a problem?" Gunho asked. his enhanced senses immediately detecting the emotional tension in the room. "No problem," Jiwon's father said before she could respond. "Just a conversation between family members." But even as he spoke, Jiwon could see the fear in his eyes. Not fear of being hurt, but fear of what his daughter had become. Fear of the distance between them that no amount of love or shared history could bridge. "You came here to judge us," Jiwon realized. "I came here to understand you," he corrected. "The people of Earth are grateful for what you've done. You saved our species from extinction, but they're also afraid of you. You've become something that doesn't seem entirely human anymore." "We're still human," Hyun said, entering the chamber, with her usual silent efficiency. "We're just human in a way that was necessary for survival." "Are you?" Jiwon's father asked. "When you look at unenhanced humans now, what do you see?" The question forced an uncomfortable moment of self-examination. When Jiwon thought about normal humans, she saw beings who were slower, weaker, and less capable than enhanced humans. She felt protective toward them, but it was the protection that a shepherd might feel for sheep rather than the equality that should exist between members of the same species. "We see family," she said, but the words felt hollow even as she spoke. "Them?" "No," her father said gently. "You see something you need to protect because it can't protect itself. That's not the same thing." The truth of his words was uncomfortable, but undeniable. Enhanced humans had evolved beyond the point where they could relate to their original species as equals. They had become guardians and protectors, but also something fundamentally separate. "Then what would you have us do?" Jiwon asked, and for the first time in months, she heard something like genuine emotion in her own voice. "Should we have let the Valkyrie harvest humanity? Should we have chosen extinction over evolution?" "I don't know," her father admitted. "Maybe there was no right choice. Maybe the price of survival was always going to be too high." As if summoned by their conversation, Minho appeared in the doorway. His enhanced senses had detected the emotional resonance from across the complex, and he had come to investigate. Behind him, Jiwon could sense the attention of dozens of other enhanced humans throughout the facility, all connected to her through their shared consciousness. "You're upset," Minho observed, studying Jiwon's biosignatures with clinical precision. "Your stress indicators are elevated beyond normal parameters." It was exactly the kind of observation that illustrated the problem. Enhanced humans could analyze each other's emotional states with scientific accuracy, but they had lost the ability to simply comfort each other with empathy and understanding. "I'm having a conversation with my father," Jiwon said. "Would you like us to optimize the discussion parameters?" Minho asked. "We could interface with his neural patterns, help him understand our perspective more clearly." The offer was meant to be helpful, but Jiwon saw her father's face go pale with horror. The idea of enhanced humans interfacing with normal human minds was exactly the kind of thing that made unmodified humans afraid of their protectors. "No," Jiwon said quickly. "That won't be necessary." Her father stood up slowly, looking around at the enhanced humans with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "I should go," he said. "I've learned what I came here to learn." "What's that?" Jiwon asked. "That we lost you," he said quietly. "Not to death or injury, but to something that might be worse. We lost you to necessity." The words hit Jiwon like a physical blow. She wanted to argue, to explain that enhanced humans were still fighting for humanity's future, still protecting the species they had come from. But as she looked at her father's face, she realized that protection and connection were not the same thing. "You're not human anymore," he continued, his voice gentle but final. "You're something that was human once, something that sacrificed its humanity to save ours. That makes you heroes, but it also makes you strangers." After he left, Jiwon found herself alone in the chamber for the first time in months. Enhanced humans rarely sought solitude, preferring the constant connection of their shared consciousness. But now she needed silence to process what had happened. She walked to the window and looked out at the city below. Enhanced humans moved through the streets with perfect efficiency, managing the complex logistics of governing dozens of worlds. They had created a civilization that was peaceful, prosperous, and utterly safe for both enhanced and unmodified humans. But it was also a civilization divided into two distinct species that could no longer truly understand each other. "Commander," Heian's voice came through their mental link. "We're receiving new communications from the outer systems. Unknown ships have been detected approaching the boundary of our territory." Ji-won felt her tactical awareness immediately activate, analyzing the threat and formulating responses. It was the reaction of a predator detecting potential prey, swift and automatic and utterly without mercy. "Are they hostile?" she asked. "Unknown. But they're clearly investigating the fall of the Velkari Empire. They want to know what happened here." The Velkari homeworld was beautiful in the way that graveyards are beautiful, perfect and cold and utterly silent. Ji-won stood on the observation deck of their captured flagship, watching the crystal cities below as her hunting fleet moved into orbital positions. 3 years of relentless pursuit had led them here, to the heart of the collective consciousness that had once seemed so powerful and unstoppable. Now, it was just another target. "Population scan complete," Heian reported. Her consciousness interfaced directly with the ship's sensors. Approximately 50 million Velkari on the surface. No defensive positions detected. No weapon signatures. They're not even trying to fight. It was strange and somehow disappointing. The enhanced humans had expected a final battle, a desperate last stand by beings who had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. Instead, they found a world that had simply given up. "They know they can't win," Minho observed from his position at the tactical station. "The collective consciousness has analyzed all our previous attacks. They understand what we've become." What they had become was something beyond anything the Velkari had prepared for. Enhanced humans no longer thought like individuals or even like a traditional military force. They had evolved into something resembling a collective consciousness themselves, but one driven by predatory instinct rather than passive absorption. Every Velkari ship they had captured, every facility they had destroyed, every battle they had won had taught them something new. They learned not just tactics and technology, but the deeper patterns of how their enemies thought and acted. They had become perfect hunters, able to anticipate and counter any strategy the collective might employ. "Begin the descent," Ji-won ordered. The enhanced humans moved through the Velkari cities like a plague of efficiency. They didn't destroy randomly or kill for pleasure. They systematically dismantled the infrastructure that supported the collective consciousness, freeing the absorbed minds of countless harvested species and shutting down the processing facilities that had consumed so many civilizations. But they also killed, not in anger or revenge, but with the calm thoroughness of exterminators dealing with an infestation. Every Velkari they encountered was studied briefly, then eliminated. Their knowledge was absorbed, their technology was catalogued, and their bodies were left behind like discarded shells. "We're receiving a communication request," Gunho reported as they reached the central administrative complex of the largest city. "It's coming from the collective core." Ji-won nodded. She had expected this. Even prey animals sometimes tried to negotiate when cornered. The holographic projector activated, showing the familiar figure of Ambassador Korvash. But he looked different now, older and somehow diminished. The confidence and superiority that had once defined him were gone, replaced by something that might have been fear. "Commander Ji-won," he said, his voice carrying tones of respect that hadn't been there during their first meeting. "I wish to discuss terms for our surrender." "There are no terms," Ji-won replied simply. Korvash's crystalline features shifted in what she recognized as confusion. "Surely you understand that our complete destruction serves no purpose. We offer valuable knowledge, advanced technology, cultural wisdom accumulated over thousands of years." "We already have your knowledge," Heian said, stepping into view. "We've absorbed it from every ship we've captured, every facility we've destroyed. We understand your technology better than you do now." "Then what do you want?" Korvash asked. And for the first time since their initial encounter, Ji-won heard genuine emotion in his voice. The question hung in the air between them. What did enhanced humans want? They had started this war to save their species, but that goal had been achieved months ago. Earth was secure, human survivors were safe, and the Velkari threat had been neutralized, but they hadn't stopped hunting. They had continued to pursue their enemies across the galaxy, tracking down every trace of the collective consciousness with relentless determination. Why? We want to make sure this never happens again, Jiwan said finally. You could accomplish that by simply destroying our harvesting technology, Korvash argued. There is no need to exterminate our entire species. Yes, there is, Minho interrupted, his voice carrying the cold logic that had replaced human emotion in all of them. Your species exists only as parasites now. You have no original culture, no independent technology, no individual consciousness. You are an infection that spreads by consuming other civilizations. We preserve the knowledge and culture of harvested species, Korvash protested. They live on within the collective. As slaves, Gunho said bluntly. As absorbed fragments, with no will of their own. That's not preservation. That's digestion. The truth was harsh but undeniable. Enhanced humans had studied the collective consciousness extensively during their campaign. What the Velkari called preservation was actually a form of eternal imprisonment, trapping the minds of harvested species in a shared consciousness where they could never again think or act independently. We offer to release them, Korvash said desperately. All the absorbed minds, all the harvested knowledge. We can separate the collective, restore individual consciousness to every species we have taken. Jiwan studied the alien's face, reading. The desperation there with enhanced senses that could detect the slightest emotional tells. You're lying, she said. The collective can't be separated. The absorbed minds have been integrated too completely. They exist now only as parts of your consciousness. Korvash's expression crumbled. Then what would you have us do? We are what we are. We cannot change our nature. Neither can we, Jiwan replied. The communication ended, and the enhanced humans continued their methodical dismantling of Velkari civilization. They worked with perfect coordination, their shared consciousness allowing them to process multiple tasks simultaneously while maintaining complete tactical awareness. It took 6 days to completely eliminate the Velkari presence on their homeworld. 6 days to end a species that had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years. When it was finished, the enhanced humans stood in empty cities that would never again echo with the thoughts of the collective consciousness. It's over, Heian said as they watched the last Velkari processing facility shut down forever. But even as she said it, they all knew it wasn't entirely true. Enhanced humans had spread throughout the galaxy during their hunt, establishing bases on dozens of worlds and creating supply lines that spanned multiple star systems. They had become something larger than a military force or even a species. They had become an ecosystem of apex predators with no natural enemies left to hunt. What happens now? Gunho asked. It was a question that none of them had really considered. For 3 years, their purpose had been clear and absolute. Hunt down and eliminate the Velkari threat. Now that the threat was gone, what were enhanced humans supposed to do with their vast capabilities and their spread across the galaxy? We go home, Jiwan said. But even as she spoke the words, she wasn't sure what home meant anymore. Enhanced humans had evolved so far beyond their original nature that Earth felt foreign to them now. The normal humans they had fought to protect seemed slow and limited, unable to understand or appreciate the sacrifices that had been made for their survival. Do we? Minho asked quietly. Can we? As they stood in the ruins of the collective that had once seemed unstoppable, enhanced humans faced the most difficult question of their existence. They had become something powerful enough to save humanity and eliminate any threat to their species. But in becoming that powerful, they had also become something that might be too dangerous to come home. The galaxy was quiet now, free from the terror of the Velkari collective. But it was also under the protection of beings who were no longer entirely human and who might never be human again. In saving their species, enhanced humans had discovered that the price of ultimate victory was becoming something that even they weren't sure they recognized anymore. Jiwan crouched in the ventilation system of a Velkari harvesting ship, listening to the movements of her team spread throughout the vessel. She couldn't hear them with her ears, but she could feel them in her mind, their positions and intentions, flowing through her consciousness like a gentle current. Below her, Velkari crew members went about their duties, unaware that their ship had been infiltrated. They moved with the calm efficiency of the collective consciousness, sharing thoughts and coordinating actions without individual will or creativity. It made them predictable. Gunho was in the engine section, his hands already interfaced with the ship's biological control systems. He had learned to speak the genetic language of Velkari technology, and now he could command their own weapons to turn against them. Hyon was near the command center, gathering intelligence about other ships in the fleet. Minho was in the processing bay, studying the harvesting equipment for weaknesses they could exploit. They had done this 17 times now. Board a Velkari ship, study it, kill the crew, and take everything useful before moving on to the next target. Each success taught them more about their enemy and made the next hunt easier. The attack began without any signal. Enhanced humans no longer needed to coordinate their actions with words or gestures. They simply moved when the moment was right, striking simultaneously from different directions. Jiwan dropped through the ceiling into a corridor filled with Velkari soldiers. Her movements were fluid and perfect, dodging energy beams and closing distance before the aliens could adjust their tactics. She had learned to interface with their weapons during combat, turning their own guns against them, or simply making them stop working. The Velkari tried to coordinate a response through their collective consciousness, but the enhanced humans moved too quickly and unpredictably. Each human fought with individual creativity, backed by perfect teamwork, a combination the collective had never encountered. Within 10 minutes, the ship was silent. Harvest complete, Gunho reported as they gathered in the command center. He was interfacing with the ship's memory core, downloading navigation data and fleet positions directly into his consciousness. 17 more ships detected in the outer system. 3 processing facilities on the 4th planet. Jiwan nodded, already planning their next moves. The enhanced humans had evolved beyond simple resistance. They had become hunters, tracking Velkari forces across star systems and eliminating them with ruthless efficiency. Any prisoners this time? Hyon asked. 2 in the processing bay, Minho replied. Both partially harvested. They might survive with treatment. The rescue of human prisoners had become routine, but also increasingly difficult. The enhanced humans could save lives, but they struggled to provide the emotional support that traumatized survivors needed. The enhancement had made them effective warriors, but it had also made them distant from the very people they were fighting to protect. Enhanced humans had established secure facilities on Earth where rescued prisoners could recover, but the normal humans who ran these facilities often seemed afraid of their enhanced protectors. The gap between the two groups was growing, wider with each passing month. "We're receiving a communication from Earth Base 7, Hyon reported, her hand pressed against the ship's communication array. 3,000 new volunteers for enhancement. They want to join the hunt. The number was both encouraging and troubling. More enhanced humans meant more effective hunting packs, but it also meant fewer normal humans remaining on Earth. At the current rate of recruitment, enhanced humans would outnumber their unmodified cousins within a year. Approve the enhancements, Jiwan decided. We need the numbers. As they prepared to jump to their next target, Minho made a discovery that changed their understanding of the war. Deep in the Velkari ship's databanks, he found records of previous harvesting operations, including detailed information about other species the collective had consumed. Look at this, he said, sharing the data through their mental link. The Velkari have been using the same tactics for over 2,000 years. They arrive peacefully, study the target species, then harvest them using techniques specifically designed to counter that species' strengths. Jiwan studied the records, seeing the pattern clearly. Species that were primarily physical fighters were defeated with mind control. Species that were mentally powerful were overwhelmed with superior technology. Species that relied on cooperation were divided and conquered. But they made a mistake with us, she realized. What mistake? Gunho asked. They studied normal humans, not enhanced ones. All their tactics are designed to counter human weaknesses, not human potential. They never prepared for what we could become. It was true. The Valkyrie had observed human civilization for decades, cataloging humanity's tendency toward cooperation, emotional decision-making, and individual heroism. They had prepared counters for all of these traits, but they had never anticipated the cold, efficient pack hunters that enhanced humans had become. The enhanced humans began to understand that they weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were engaged in a type of warfare that the galaxy had never seen before. Every other species the Valkyrie had encountered had tried to remain true to their original nature while fighting. Enhanced humans had abandoned their nature entirely, becoming whatever they needed to be to win. We're not fighting like humans, Hyan observed during their next hunt. We're fighting like evolution itself. She was right. Enhanced humans adapted to each new challenge with frightening speed. When Valkyrie ships began using new shield frequencies, the enhanced immediately developed countermeasures. When the collective consciousness tried to predict human tactics, the enhanced changed their approach so rapidly that prediction became impossible. But the most disturbing development was how enhanced humans had begun to think about their enemies. They no longer saw the Valkyrie as evil invaders who needed to be stopped. They saw them as prey that needed to be eliminated. The distinction was subtle but important. We're becoming something that should probably scare normal humans, Gunho admitted after their 20th successful ship capture. Maybe something that should scare us too. Jiwan looked at her reflection in the polished surface of a Valkyrie control panel. She looked human, but her eyes held a coldness that no human had ever possessed. When she smiled, it was the expression of a predator that had cornered something tasty. Does it matter what we become, she asked, as long as we protect them? But protection was becoming a complicated concept. Enhanced humans were so effective at hunting Valkyrie forces that they had begun expanding their operations beyond Earth's solar system. They tracked fleeing alien ships to other star systems, following the collective back to worlds they had never seen. Each new system they entered revealed more evidence of the Valkyrie's crimes, planets where entire civilizations had been harvested, leaving behind only empty cities and silent monuments to species that no longer existed. The enhanced humans studied these dead worlds, learning about the collective's methods and growing, more determined to end their reign. We're not just saving humanity anymore, Minho observed as they stood in the ruins of a city on the fifth planet of the Kepler 442 system. We're avenging every species the Valkyrie have ever destroyed. The thought was both noble and terrifying. Enhanced humans had evolved beyond defending their own species. They had become the galaxy's apex predator, hunting down any trace of the collective consciousness that had tormented so many worlds. But as their hunting range expanded, communication with Earth became more difficult. Enhanced humans, operating in distant star systems, began making decisions independently, developing their own tactics and priorities. They were still coordinated through their mental links, but they were also becoming more autonomous. We're evolving again, Heian reported during one of their rare contacts with Earth. The enhancement isn't finished with us. We're still changing, still adapting to new challenges. The changes were subtle but significant. Enhanced humans were becoming faster, stronger, and more intelligent with each passing month. Their ability to interface with alien technology was improving, and their tactical coordination was reaching levels that bordered on supernatural. How long before we can't communicate with normal humans at all? Gunho wondered. It was a question that none of them could answer. Enhanced humans still protected unmodified humans, but they increasingly saw them as a separate species that needed care rather than equals who deserved respect. The gap was becoming a chasm. Maybe that's the price of survival, Jiwan said quietly. Maybe saving humanity means creating something that isn't human anymore. As they prepared for their next hunt, tracking a Valkyrie fleet toward what appeared to be the collective's core worlds, the enhanced humans faced a difficult truth. They had become so effective at hunting their enemies that they were no longer recognizable as the species they had originally set out to save. But they were winning. Velkari forces were retreating from human space, their ships fleeing toward distant stars as enhanced humans pursued them like wolves tracking wounded prey. The collective consciousness that had seemed so powerful and inevitable was beginning to show signs of real fear. For the first time in thousands of years, the Velkari were the ones being hunted, and their hunte. Jiwan woke up 3 days later feeling like she had been torn apart and rebuilt by someone who only half remembered what a human was supposed to look like. Her body was the same, but everything else had changed. She could see in the dark now, and her hearing was so sharp that she could track conversations happening in caves hundreds of meters away. When she touched the Velkari equipment that Minho had salvaged, information flowed directly into her mind without her needing to read or study anything. But the most disturbing change was in her thoughts. The emotions that had once driven her decisions now felt distant and quiet. She could remember caring deeply about saving every human life, but that caring felt like something that had happened to someone else. "How do you feel?" Minho asked when she finally sat up. He looked different too, his eyes sharper and more focused, his movements precise and economical. "Empty," Jiwan said, and realized she didn't mind the emptiness. It was clean and efficient, but also clear. "I can see things I never noticed before." Around them, other survivors were waking up from their own transformations. Gunho stretched like a cat testing its muscles, then picked up his rifle and began stripping it down and rebuilding it without looking at his hands. Hayan was studying a map of Velkari positions, but she was reading it like she had drawn it herself. "The enhancement worked differently on each of us," Minho explained. "It seems to have awakened dormant genetic patterns that were already in human DNA. We're still human, but we're human the way we would have evolved if we had never developed civilization." "You mean we're savages?" Gunho said without looking up from his weapon. "No," Minho replied thoughtfully. "We're predators." Over the following weeks, the enhanced humans began their counterattack. They moved through the mountains like ghosts, striking at Velkari patrols and supply lines with perfect coordination. They didn't need to communicate with words anymore. Somehow they could sense each other's intentions and movements. The first Velkari soldiers they killed, they studied carefully. Enhanced humans learned by doing, by touching, by tasting. They discovered that Velkari technology was biological, grown rather than built, and that it responded to genetic patterns and neural frequencies. "We can interface with their systems," Jiwan reported during one of their brief rest periods. She had her hand pressed against a captured Velkari weapon, and information was flowing between them like water. Their ships, their weapons, their communication networks. It's all designed to respond to enhanced consciousness. "The question is," Hayan said, "did they design it that way or did someone else?" It was a good question. As they captured more equipment and studied more prisoners, a disturbing pattern emerged. The Velkari collective consciousness was not originally Velkari. It was a combination of dozens of harvested species, each adding their knowledge and abilities to the whole. "Look at this," Minho said, showing them data he had extracted from a Velkari memory core. Their original species was actually quite primitive. They were farmers and artists, not warriors or scientists. Everything they are now they stole from the species they harvested. The enhanced humans began to understand what they were really fighting. The Velkari were not conquerors in any traditional sense. They were parasites, feeding on the achievements and cultures of other species. They had grown powerful by consuming civilizations, but they had also grown lazy and predictable. They don't know how to adapt, Jiwan realized during an attack on a Velkari processing facility. They can only use what they've already learned from their victims. They've never faced anything new. The attack on the processing facility was their first major victory. Enhanced humans moved through the building like a plague, their movements perfectly coordinated without any communication. They killed Velkari guards with weapons taken from previous raids, but more importantly, they freed hundreds of human prisoners. The freed humans were changed by their experience. The Velkari had begun the harvesting process on many of them, extracting memories and emotions before the rescue came. Those who survived were hollow and broken, but they remembered what had been done to them. "Make them pay," whispered a woman who had once been a teacher in Chicago. "Make them pay for what they took from us." Word of the successful rescue spread to other human survivors around the world. Small groups of fighters began seeking out the enhanced humans, begging to be transformed so they could join the fight. Minho's enhancement process became faster and more efficient as he learned to adapt it to different genetic patterns. But the transformation was not without cost. Enhanced humans found it difficult to connect with their unmodified relatives and friends. They moved differently, thought differently, and wanted different things. The drive to protect humanity was still there, but it had become cold and practical rather than warm and emotional. "We're losing ourselves," Hyan said during one of their strategy meetings. She was studying reports from around the world, tracking Velkari movements with inhuman precision. "Every day we become more like them and less like who we used to be." "Does it matter?" Gunho asked. He had just returned from a solo mission where he had destroyed an entire Velkari outpost without taking a single casualty. "As long as we win?" The question hung in the air between them. They were winning. Enhanced humans were spreading across the globe, striking at Velkari positions with increasing effectiveness. But they were also becoming something that unenhanced humans found frightening. Jiwan watched a group of rescued prisoners try to thank their enhanced rescuers. The normal humans seemed nervous and uncomfortable, as if they could sense that their saviors were no longer quite the same species. The enhanced humans responded politely but without warmth, like scientists being thanked by laboratory animals. "We need more volunteers for enhancement," Minho reported. "Our current numbers aren't enough to cover all the Velkari positions globally." "How many more?" Jiwan asked. "At least 10,000, maybe more." The number was staggering. 10,000. Enhanced humans would mean 10,000 people choosing to give up their humanity to save their species. It would mean creating an army of predators who might never be able to find their way back to what they had been. But as reports came in of more processing facilities, more harvesting operations, more human cultures being erased and absorbed into the Velkari collective, the choice became clear. "Begin recruitment," Jiwan ordered. "Anyone who volunteers gets the enhancement. Anyone who doesn't stays in the protected zones." The transformation began to accelerate. Enhanced humans became recruiters, traveling to survivor communities and explaining what the process involved. Some people volunteered immediately, driven by rage and loss. Others needed more convincing. "You won't be the same person afterward," enhanced recruiters warned potential volunteers. "You'll be stronger, smarter, and more capable, but you'll also be colder. You might not care about the same things you care about now." Most volunteers didn't hesitate. They had seen what the Velkari did to captured humans. They had watched their families and friends disappear into processing centers. The chance to fight back, even at the cost of their own humanity, was worth any price. But as the enhanced population grew, so did the distance between them and normal humans. Enhanced individuals began forming their own communities, their own command structures, their own culture. They protected unenhanced humans, but they didn't live among them anymore. "We're becoming a separate species," Heian observed one evening as she watched enhanced soldiers train in combat techniques that no normal human could perform. "They look like us, but they're not us anymore." Jiwan stood beside her, noting the same thing. The enhanced humans moved with perfect efficiency, their faces calm and focused. They were beautiful in the way that apex predators were beautiful, dangerous and graceful and utterly without mercy. "Maybe that's what we need to be," Jiwan said quietly. "Maybe humans as we were couldn't survive what's coming. Maybe this is evolution." That night, Minho made a discovery that changed everything. Deep in the genetic modifications that the enhancement process created, he found something that shouldn't have been there. Patterns and structures that were too complex, too purposeful, to have developed by accident. "The potential for enhancement was already in our DNA," he told the command group. "It's been there for millions of years, dormant and waiting. The Velkari invasion didn't create this ability. It just woke it up." "You're saying we were always capable of this?" Gunho asked. I'm saying we were designed for this, Minho replied. Somewhere in humanity's past, someone or something modified our genetic code to include the potential for rapid adaptation under extreme stress. The enhancement process isn't changing us into something alien. It's revealing what we really are. The implications were staggering. If Minho was right, then humans were not the primitive species the Velkari had believed them to be. They were something much older and much more dangerous, something that had been waiting for the right trigger to awaken. As enhanced humans spread across the world, organizing resistance and striking back at their oppressors, they began to understand that they were not just fighting for survival. They were fulfilling a purpose that had been written into their genes long before the first human had ever looked up at the stars and wondered what was waiting out there in the dark. G1 barely made it off the Velkari flagship before the real invasion began. She had spent the night running through corridors, dodging alien security patrols, trying to reach the shuttle bay. When she finally escaped, Earth's sky was already filled with crystal ships. The Velkari moved with terrible efficiency. Their beautiful embassy buildings opened like flowers, revealing hidden weapons and transport systems. Beams of blue light swept across cities, and everywhere they touched, humans simply stopped moving. They stood still like statues, their eyes blank and empty. From her small escape pod, Ji-won watched New York disappear under a dome of shimmering energy. The same thing was happening in London, Tokyo, Paris, and every other major city. The Velkari were capturing humanity's population centers one by one. Her radio crackled with panicked voices from around the world. Military units were trying to fight back, but their weapons barely scratched the alien ships. Every missile, every bullet, every attempt at resistance was met with that same blue light that turned soldiers into mindless puppets. "Commander Ji-won, do you copy?" The voice belonged to Major Haeon, and she sounded desperate. "I'm here," Ji-won replied, steering her pod toward the coordinates Haeon had given her. "What's the situation?" "Bad. Really bad. The aliens hit our command centers first. Most of our military leadership is captured or dead. I'm organizing survivors in the Colorado mountains, but we don't have much time." Ji-won's pod landed in a forest clearing where dozens of people were gathered around military vehicles and equipment. Soldiers, scientists, and civilians who had been lucky enough to escape the initial attack were working together to set up some kind of base. Haeon met her as she climbed out of the pod. The major looked tired and angry, her uniform torn and dirty. "Thank God you made it out," she said. "We need to know everything you learned on their ship." Over the next hour, Ji-won told them about the harvest schedule, the surveillance, and Korvash's cold explanation of what the Velkari planned to do. The people listening grew quieter and more frightened with every word. "They're not trying to kill us," she finished. "They want to study us, take what makes us human, and add it to their collective. We're not people to them. We're just another species to be processed." A gruff voice spoke up from the back of the group. "Then we make them regret that mistake." Thuk. Speaker was Staff Sergeant Gunho, a career Marine who had survived the destruction of his base through sheer luck and stubbornness. He was a big man with scars on his hands and a look in his eyes that said he had never backed down from a fight in his life. "What do you mean?" Haeon asked. Gunho stepped forward, his jaw set with determination. "I mean, we show these crystal freaks what humans do when someone tries to harvest us. We fight. We make them bleed. We make them wish they had never heard of Earth." Over the following days, more survivors found their way to the mountain base. They brought horrible stories of what was happening in the captured cities. The Velkari had sorted the human population into different groups. The smartest people were taken to processing facilities where machines studied their brains. The strongest were sent to work camps to build more alien structures. The weakest were used for medical experiments. Dr. Minho arrived 3 days later, leading a small group of scientists who had escaped from a research facility. He looked pale and shaken, but he carried with him something that gave everyone hope. "I managed to save some of our research data," he told the assembled group, "including samples of Velkari biotechnology that I've been studying. I think I know how their systems work." He set up a makeshift laboratory in one of the mountain caves, working day and night to understand the alien technology. What he discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. They're not just advanced, he explained to Jiwon and Haeyeon during one of their planning meetings. They're enhanced. Every Valkyrie we've seen has been modified with biotechnology that connects them to their collective consciousness. That's how they coordinate so perfectly, how they share information instantly. Can we use that against them? Gunho asked, from where he sat cleaning his rifle. Minho hesitated. Maybe, but it would require us to modify ourselves in ways that might change what we are. The Valkyrie enhancement system is designed to suppress individual thought and emotion. It makes them efficient, but it also makes them cold. Inhuman. Meanwhile, the Resistance was learning just how outmatched they were. Gunho led several raid attempts against Valkyrie facilities, but each mission ended in disaster. Human weapons couldn't penetrate alien shields. Human tactics were easily predicted by the collective consciousness. Human courage meant nothing when the enemy could turn off your brain with a beam of light. After losing half his team in a failed attack on a processing center, Gunho returned to base bloody and furious. We can't fight them like this, he admitted. Every time we try, they learn our methods and adapt. They're always one step ahead. That night, screams echoed through the captured cities. Haeyeon had managed to intercept some Valkyrie communications, and the translations were horrifying. The processing centers weren't just studying human brains. They were extracting memories, emotions, and experiences, copying them into Valkyrie databanks. They're stealing souls, Haeyeon said quietly as she showed the others the translated reports. They take everything that makes a person who they are and add it to their collective. The body dies, but the mind becomes part of them forever. The worst part was learning that humanity wasn't the first. The Valkyrie databases contained information about dozens of other species that had been harvested over the centuries. Each civilization had tried to resist in their own way. Some had fought with honor and courage. Others had tried to negotiate or hide. None had succeeded. Look at this, Minho said, pointing to data about a species called the Threnodi. They were master engineers who built incredible space cities. The Valkyrie harvested them 200 years ago, and here the Yalinti were brilliant artists and philosophers. Gone. All of them are gone, but their knowledge lives on in the collective. Jiwon felt sick as she read through the files. Every species had possessed something special, something unique that the Valkyrie wanted. They had all believed they could find a way to survive, to negotiate, to resist. They had all been wrong. What made us different? She asked. Why did they wait so long to harvest us? Minho was quiet for a moment, studying the data. I think they were waiting for us to develop something specific, something none of the other species had. What? I'm not sure yet, but based on their scanning patterns, they seem particularly interested in human aggression and adaptability. Most species they've harvested were peaceful, cooperative societies. We're the first ones who still had active military forces and a history of constant warfare. A new alarm interrupted their discussion. Valkyrie ships were approaching the mountain base. Somehow, the aliens had found their hiding place. Everyone move, Gunho shouted, grabbing his weapons. We evacuate now, but as they ran for their vehicles, Jiwon realized it was too late. Blue light filled the sky above them, and one by one the fleeing humans stopped moving. Their eyes went blank as the Valkyrie harvesting beam took control of their minds. Jiwon felt the light washing over her, felt her thoughts becoming slow and distant. In her fading consciousness, she could hear Korvash's voice speaking through the collective. Do not resist, Commander. Your species has served its purpose. You will become part of something greater. But as the blue light tried to take control of her mind, something unexpected happened. Instead of going blank like the others, Jiwon felt a surge of pure rage. The light flickered and weakened, as if her anger was somehow interfering with its signal. She looked around and saw that a few others were still conscious. Gunho was on his knees fighting against the beam with raw determination. Minho had somehow activated a piece of Valkyrie technology that was creating interference. Haeyeon was helping other survivors who seemed partially resistant to the effect. Get to the cave, Minho shouted over the sound of approaching ships. I have something that might help us fight back. As they stumbled into the laboratory cave, Minho grabbed a device he had been working on in secret. It looked like a combination of human electronics and Velkari biotechnology, crude but functional. "This is dangerous," he warned them. "But it's the only way we can match their enhancement. It will change us, make us more like them. We might not be the same people afterward." Jiwan looked at the device, then at the blank faces of the captured humans outside. "Will it let us fight them?" "Yes. But the price is everything that makes us human." Gunho grabbed the device from Minho's hands. "Then let's pay it," he said grimly. "Because being human hasn't done us much good so far." As Velkari soldiers entered the cave, their crystal weapons glowing with lethal energy, Jiwan made her choice. She activated Minho's enhancement device and felt it burning through her veins like liquid fire. The last thing she remembered as a purely human consciousness was the sound of her own voice, screaming in pain and rage as something ancient and terrible awakened in her genetic code. When the enhancement was complete, Jiwan opened her eyes and looked at the world with new understanding. The Velkari soldiers approaching them were no longer terrifying alien invaders. They were prey. The real war was about to begin. Commander Jiwan stood on the observation deck of the space station, watching the massive ships appear from nowhere. They came through tiers in space itself, bright blue holes that opened like doors in the darkness. The alien vessels were beautiful, in a way that made her chest tight with wonder. They looked like they were made of crystalline light, flowing in smooth curves that human engineers could never achieve. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission," said Lieutenant Minho from his position at the communications console. His voice was steady, but Jiwan could hear the excitement underneath. This was the moment humanity had dreamed of for centuries. First contact. Jiwan straightened her uniform and walked to the center of the command bridge. Around her, dozens of HFY officers from Earth's United Fleet worked at their stations. Everyone was trying to look calm, but she could feel the tension in the air. History was being made. "Put it through," she ordered. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at something that was definitely not human. The being on the screen was tall and elegant, with skin that seemed to shimmer like water. Its features were sharp and beautiful, like someone had carved them from precious stone. When it spoke, its voice was smooth and musical. "Greetings, people of the third planet," the alien said. "I am Ambassador Korvash of the Velkari Collective. We come in peace, seeking friendship with your young species." Jiwan felt her heart racing. She had trained for this moment for years, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality. She was speaking to an alien, a real alien from another world. "Welcome to our system, Ambassador Korvash," she replied, proud that her voice stayed steady. "I am Commander Jiwan of the United Earth Fleet. We are honored by your visit." The alien's face shifted in what might have been a smile. "The honor is ours, Commander. Your species shows great promise. We have watched your progress with interest. You have overcome many challenges to reach the stars." Behind Jiwan, Major Heian leaned forward in her chair. The military advisor was always suspicious of strangers, but even she seemed impressed by the alien's peaceful approach. "They've been watching us," she whispered to Minho. "For how long?" Korvash continued speaking. "We represent a collective of civilizations that spans many star systems. We offer knowledge, technology, and friendship to species that show the wisdom to accept guidance. Your people have reached the point where you can join us among the stars." Jiwan felt a thrill of excitement. Everything humanity had hoped for was being offered freely. "What would this partnership involve?" she asked. "We will establish embassy centers on your world," Korvash explained. "Our people will share our knowledge of science, medicine, and space travel. In return, we ask only for the chance to learn from your unique perspective. Every species brings something special to the collective." The next few hours passed quickly. The Velkari ships moved into orbit around Earth, their crystal hulls reflecting sunlight in beautiful patterns. Smaller craft descended to the surface, carrying Velkari diplomats to the major cities. The aliens were polite, respectful, and genuinely interested in human culture. Jiwan found herself assigned as the primary human liaison. She spent her days aboard the Velkari flagship, learning about their technology and their history. The ship itself was a marvel. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that glowed with soft light. The air was perfectly clean and smelled faintly of something like flowers. Korvash was an excellent host. He showed her rooms full of wonders that human science could barely understand. There were devices that could heal any injury, computers that thought faster than the human brain, and energy sources that could power entire cities without any fuel. Your people will benefit greatly from this knowledge, Korvash told her, as they walked through a garden that somehow existed inside. The spaceship. The plants were alien but beautiful, with leaves that changed color as they moved. Why are you doing this? Jiwan asked. What do you get from helping us? Korvash paused beside a tree with silver bark and blue flowers. The collective grows stronger when new voices join it. Your species has qualities that we admire. Your creativity, your ability to adapt, your drive to explore. These traits will make you valuable members of our community. But not everyone was as impressed as Jiwan. Down in the science labs, Minho was studying the Velkari gifts with growing concern. The devices they had given humanity were incredible, but they all had one thing in common. They were constantly scanning and recording everything around them. Look at this, he said to Heian during one of their private meetings. He held up a small Velkari medical scanner. This thing doesn't just check for diseases, it's mapping brain patterns, recording genetic information, even measuring emotional responses. Heian frowned at the device. Maybe they need that information to calibrate their medicine for human biology. Maybe, Minho said, but he didn't sound convinced. But why do their entertainment systems have the same scanning functions? Why do their communication devices record conversations even when they're turned off? As the weeks passed, more Velkari arrived on Earth. They built their embassy centers quickly, using construction methods that seemed like magic to human observers. The buildings rose from the ground in smooth curves of crystal and metal, perfectly integrated with their surroundings. The aliens were always friendly and helpful. They answered every question with patience and gave tours of their facilities to anyone who asked. Human scientists and diplomats from every nation visited the embassy centers, eager to learn from these advanced beings. But Minho kept noticing things that bothered him. The Velkari asked detailed questions about human population numbers, industrial capacity, and military strength. They seemed especially interested in human children, studying their development and education systems with great care. They're cataloging us, he told Jiwan during one of their meetings, like we're specimens in a laboratory. Jiwan shook her head. You're being paranoid. They're just trying to understand our culture so they can help us better. Then why won't they let us examine their technology? Minho asked. Every device they give us is sealed. We can use them, but we can't learn how they work. They say it's for our safety, but what? Jiwan demanded. She was tired of Minho's suspicions. The Velkari had offered humanity everything it had ever wanted, and he was looking for problems that didn't exist. But it means we stay dependent on them, Minho finished quietly. We can use their tools, but we can't make our own. We can live in their buildings, but we can't understand how they're constructed. They're not sharing knowledge with us. They're just giving us toys to keep us busy. That night, Jiwan couldn't sleep. She walked through the corridors of the Velkari flagship, thinking about Minho's words. The ship was quiet, but she could feel it humming with activity. Somewhere in its crystal walls, machines were working, processing information, making decisions. She found herself in front of a door she had never seen before. It was different from the others. Darker, with symbols carved into its surface that seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. As she reached toward it, her hand trembling with curiosity, the door slid open. Inside was a room filled with screens and displays. But these weren't showing star charts or scientific data. They were showing Earth, thousands of images of humans going about their daily lives, unaware they were being watched. Children playing in parks, workers in factories, soldiers training at military bases, and in the center of it all was a list. Names and numbers that made Jiwan's blood run cold. Population counts, resource assessments, and at the bottom, a single word that changed everything. Harvest schedule. The truth hit her like a physical blow. The Velkari weren't here to help humanity join the stars. They were here to take everything humans had built, everything humans were, and add it to their collective. The friendly aliens, the generous gifts, the patient teaching. It was all preparation for something terrible. Jiwon backed away from the screens, her mind racing. How long did humanity have? How could she warn everyone without causing panic? How could Earth's primitive weapons fight against technology this advanced? As she turned to leave, she found Korvash standing in the doorway. His beautiful features were calm, but his eyes held no warmth. "I had hoped you would not find this room so soon," he said gently. "But perhaps it is better this way. Now you can help your people understand what comes next." Jiwon's hand moved to the weapon at her side, but she knew it was useless. "What are you going to do to us?" "What we do to all promising species," Korvash replied. "We will preserve what makes you special and add it to the collective. Your creativity will enhance our art. Your adaptability will strengthen our science. Your drive to explore will expand our reach among the stars. And what happens to humanity?" Korvash's expression was almost sad. "Individual existence is inefficient, Commander. The collective is eternal. Your people will live forever as part of something greater than they could ever achieve alone." Jiwon understood then that there would be no negotiation, no peaceful solution. The Velkari had not come as friends. They had come as harvesters, and humanity was just another crop to be gathered. The war for Earth's survival was about to begin,